Hello, everyone. My name is Elvis. I'm a medical doctor, and I'm also autistic. So I'm going to talk about the double empathy problem. So if you don't know what that is, let me explain. So if you take a room full of autistic people and non-autistic people and you put them together, there actually is a breakdown of communication and empathy when they're placed together. So the previous idea or theory behind it was that autistic people lacked empathy. There was an inability for them to sort of relate to non-autistic individuals. But this sort of study that found sort of the theory of the double empathy problem actually shows that it was a mutual breakdown of communication and empathy between both of them due to a lack of shared experiences. When they took a room full of autistic individuals, that breakdown of communication and empathy actually wasn't there. They were able to relate and get along and sort of have this positive experience. And the same goes for non-autistic individuals when they're placed in a room together. However, when they place the autistic and non-autistic people in the room together, again, the breakdown of communication and empathy. So empathy is actually something that a lot of people sort of share through similar lived experiences. So it's much easier to have when you've lived through sort of, similar lives or similar experiences throughout your life. Something that you can both just sort of bond and relate to. And that actually helps build a stronger communication and sort of trust in an individual that you feel more like familiar with. In order to combat this, there actually has to be sort of this two-way streak between them. And that's why it's called the double empathy problem. Because there's a lack of empathy between both the autistic and non-autistic individual. So in this case, they both need to communicate and sort of overcome sort of the said barrier between them or breakdown of communication. So the non-autistic person has to figure out how to communicate with the autistic person who's probably like, not good at communicating, maybe nonverbal, maybe sensory overload, maybe would prefer a certain form of communication. And similarly, the autistic individual has to figure out a way to communicate with the non autistic individual. I've had similar experiences in the hospital actually with some individuals. Personally, for me, I think just staying quiet and listening and trying to understand their perspective and where they place values in certain things actually really helps me. Even though I personally don't understand or don't place values in those things, just remembering that they place value in this and I should do things sort of wrapped around that idea of this is where their value is. This is how they sort of want things to be framed. This actually has worked relatively well, at least the being quiet part. There's lots of power actually in being quiet and just listening. You can learn quite a lot. And then the second thing is sometimes communication is very difficult and it did break down many times. And just simply telling them that I was autistic actually help open their mind to the possibility of shifting their framework. But yeah, let me know your guys' thoughts on the double empathy problem. Have a great day.